Sexy First Friday, and today is the day that we are doing Enneagram Type 5. I am just waiting for Sam to join me, who is my partner in Sexy First Fridays, but she's also our guest today because she is a sexual 5, and we're super excited to be talking about how top type 5s show up in sexuality. Hopefully she will be here in a few minutes and then we can get started. Every once in a while we have technological issues, and so we've been hopping on just a few minutes early. So if there are any of those today, we are still starting on time at noon. So we're a little bit early. It's a little bit before 12 p.m. Where I am, which is Central Standard Time, or Daylight Savings Time still. It's not Standard Time yet. And hopefully she will be here soon for us to talk about sexual or just 5s in general and sexuality. So just hanging on here, waiting for Sam to join. It looks like I see that we're just waiting for Sam to join here, and then we'll get started. As well. So hopefully Sam will be on here just a few minutes, then we'll kind of get started and we'll start talking about our 5s. Just kind of waiting. Hopefully she's not having difficulty getting on today. You never know. Sometimes things happen, and sometimes things don't go so well. So let me just look to make sure I didn't get any messages from her. Saying she's running late or anything. I don't see anything, so we'll just kind of wait just a few more. Oh, there she is. She's here now. Let's accept. Hopefully everything works out well. To see you. All right, I'm accepting it, Sam. Let's see. Yay! No issues today. That's always the best thing ever, right? Hopefully Instagram got all their bugs figured out so that we don't have issues with that anymore.
Happy Friday, Lindsay.
Happy Friday. I just saw you yesterday and I see that one of our workshop participants is on here today as well, and it's great to have you here with us as well today. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to what number are we on now? Is this the 5th in the series? 4th in the series?
Yeah.
Today is the 5th in the series. So today we are talking about our Enneagram 5s. We have already done Enneagram Type 9s, Enneagram Type 8s, Enneagram Type 7s, and 6s. And today we're going to talk about our Enneagram 5s, which Sam is, as well as my husband, but they're different subtypes. So that'll be interesting for us to focus on a little bit. And we're just going to start by quick intros. I know a lot of people already know who we are, but every once in a while we get new people on here. So we just like to introduce who we are and a little bit about our background. Why don't you go ahead and go first today, Sam, and talk a little bit about who you are.
Sure. And sorry to those who are tired of hearing us introduce ourselves, but if you're new here, I'm Sam E Greenberg. I am a sexuality researcher and a Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, relationships, and intimacy. My doctoral research focuses on the intersection between Enneagram type and instinct and sexual desire and expression. I'm a type 5, and I'm a sexual subtype 5 with a 4 wing.
Hi, and I am Lindsay Frasier. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist and an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I have a private practice where I specialize in relationships and sexuality utilizing the Enneagram. And I've been doing this now, or I've been here now for about 12 years. Well, let's talk a little bit about how 5s show up. So I thought I would start with just a little bit about how they show it up in therapy or not show up in therapy. And then Sam was going to talk a little bit more about how they present in the research. So one of the really interesting things about 5s in particular in therapy is typically they do not seek it out on their own. They are usually brought in by a partner who is potentially having or likely having relationship issues with them, and they're wanting things to shift and change. Now, the interesting thing with that is oftentimes once fives make that first step to kind of come into the therapy room and meet with us, they oftentimes do start to like sort of meeting with me one-on-one individually. Sam and I were talking a little bit about this because I think a lot of times it kind of depends on the therapist. And I think that a lot of fives are going to kind of come in, maybe test the therapist, see if they like the experience or not. And they may not stick around, though I in particular attract a lot of fives into my particular practice. And I'm not sure if it's an Enneagram 9 thing or if it's how I show up as a therapist. But one of the things that I notice with fives in particular, do not play the therapy games with them. They know what you're doing. They oftentimes have probably researched a little bit about what therapy is and strategies that therapists use. So include them sort of in the process and really keep them up to date on what you're actually doing. They love it when you say, hey, I'm going to try this particular strategy with you. I think it may be helpful. Where with some other types, you might be doing a little bit of your questioning and things might be a little bit more hidden as far as what you're actually doing in the therapy work to kind of get the goals and the progress that they want. Fives want you to be very upfront. Give them the books. They want every book. They want every data point. They want to know where you got the information, how you got the information, how applicable the information is. Tell them how successful people are in therapy with you. They really want to know those types of things. And so the more that they know, the more comfortable that they feel with you. And it's also kind of a lot of rapport building as well. Fives are extremely private. And so it is a little bit, I was telling Sam earlier when we were just kind of touching base on this, I was thinking of like a social five in my office. And it's really interesting because like when I hit the point, like he won't confirm or deny that I'm getting it right, but he'll kind of laugh a little bit and like look me in the eyes, and I will get that moment of like, yep, he feels seen. He feels like I get it. And so I think one of the things for therapists working with fives is that you really have to have that ability to kind of tap into like what is actually happening in that emotional world kind of behind. Even though you may not see a whole lot of emotional expression from them, there's a lot going on beneath the surface. And when you hit it, you'll kind of get an eye look like, oh, you got me. But I'm not going to confirm you got me, but you got me. And so that's a little bit in the sexuality piece. I tend to attract a lot of self-preservation fives that come in. And sexual fives. I've only seen one social five, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they tend to be more often than not, the self-preservation five coming in that I frequently see is going to be presenting as sort of the lower desire partner in the sexual relationship. So that's a little bit about the therapy room. Why don't you move into some of the research, Sam?
Sure. So I actually noticed myself do the look that you described by accident when you said all of that about like when you feel seen, you won't just confirm or deny, you'll just give a look. And I was like, oh, that's really true. And I gave you the look, and I was like, oh wow, there's the look. We could do a whole episode on fives in therapy, and actually, like, a lot of therapists are wanting that because it's hard to work with fives. But of course, we are here today to talk about sex. So let me tell you a little bit about the research on fives and sexuality. So I'm going to go a little deeper into data today because I know my audience and my fives love data. So actually, fives are reporting the lowest overall desire for partnered sex, along with sixes of any type. And you have to be careful how you interpret that because that we immediately think, oh, fives don't have desire. That's not necessarily what that's saying. What it's saying is fives are not necessarily wanting to actualize their desire with a partner as much as any other type is. And we can talk about why that might be. I didn't get into the reasoning in my study, but fives being private, being solitary, oftentimes, a lot of fives are okay feeling desire, not necessarily then acting on it. So that's one data point on fives. And I'd like to say a note on statistical significance. Get a little nerdy here for the fives that are here. So within a quantitative study, you have rankings, who's highest, who's lowest. And then you have statistical significance, meaning we can be quite sure that these rankings are not just happening because of randomness, noise in the data. We can be pretty sure with statistical significance that the differences are in fact meaningful. So with the data point that I just said, fives and sixes, lowest overall partnered desire. There's some closeness with the fives and sixes also to ones. Ones are pretty low as well. And then we have our nines a little higher, a little more in the middle. Then all the other types, twos, fours, sevens, eights, and threes, very statistically different, very statistically significantly different from our fives and sixes at the bottom there. So that's just a note on statistical significance. One of the most interesting things I think about fives, at least in my study that I found, is fives have the lowest responsiveness to all desire cues. So I measured on what's called the Cues for Sexual Desire scale that measured 4 different types of desire cues. If you're watching this and you're not a five, I'm really sorry, but this is what's happening. Um, the desire cues, 4 different types of things that make us feel desire. So there's romantic implicit cues, emotional cues, visual proximity cues, and explicit erotic cues. And for most of the types, they are responsive to some of those things and not to others. So for example, like our threes are super responsive to visual proximity cues. That means like someone famous, someone well-dressed, someone classy. And then the threes are less responsive to some of the other ones. Fives are saying we're not responsive to any of them. No cues. Which means basically that fives are not so responsive in our desire. We're more self-contained. We're more spontaneous. We have our own desire come up for our own reasons versus having someone else do something that then results in desire in us. So lowest responsivity to all desire cues. I think that's pretty interesting. And one more quick note about this is especially with the romantic cues, which is like candlelight dinners, holding hands, walking on the beach, emotional cues, which is talking about your relationship, feeling secure. Fives are an absolute no to those things and very statistically clearly not into it, whereas almost all the other types are at least a little bit. So those are some of the standout data points on fives.
Well, let's move a little bit into the subtype differences and how our different subtypes show up in sexuality. We're going to start with social fives, but also keep in mind, because fives are very private and like to keep to themselves, we actually don't have a whole lot of information on our social fives. So social fives, if you're out there, start letting us know a little bit more about how you approach sexuality, because most of you don't want to show up in focus groups. You don't want to participate in the research. You don't come into therapy, though I have one that has come into therapy, but I've been in practice 12 years and one social five's come in. I've had most of the other types and subtypes present at some point or another sort of in the practice. What I do think is interesting, and why I think this is probably a possibility of why that's happening, if you think of the social instinct, right? The social instinct as a social dominant myself is there is more worry about what other people think, right? And worry about how people will perceive us. And so then when you take a five, who's also a very self-contained, private individual, I'm actually not surprised that we're not seeing a lot of information or research sort of around them. There probably is some fear of like what that would mean. I don't know enough. I might be seen a certain way. And so I'm not actually surprised that that sort of is what's happening with our social fives. And so we don't have a lot to say about social fives, though I think Sam does have a little bit of research around how they show up sexually.
I do. So in my study, it was anonymous. People can just fill out questions and they don't have to actually talk to someone face to face. So I do have social fives in my data set. And what I learned about social fives have relatively high explicit materials use or porn use, they're actually up there with the top 5 subtypes of use, along with sexual and social 8, sexual 4, sexual 9. Social 5 is up there, high users. What we don't know is why, because when we got into qualitative research, which is focus groups, interviews, like Lindsay said, the social 5s are not showing up. Um, Something kind of funny is that I thought of 3 different people that we could have asked to be a guest today, so that you aren't just hearing from me all the time. And I ended up not asking any of them. There's 1 social 5 and 2 self-pres 5s that I have a good relationship with. And I was like, they're all going to be a definite no to talking about their sex lives on the internet. I'm going to just not bother, and we'll have to have Sam as the guest again, which obviously I have a little bit of a sexual instinct bias, but it is really hard, obviously, to get 5s to share, which is why in the Enneagram world at large, 5s who will be in interviews and panels are in quite high demand. So that's most of what we know about socials is they have higher porn use. They fall in line on the desire stuff that I already mentioned, and that they're quite private about sharing.
And what about our sexual subtype, Sam? How do they show up?
Okay, so at least I could be an expert on this, both from my own experience and from working with and talking to other sexual 5s. So sexual 5s in the research, we have higher interest and participation in BDSM compared to the other subtypes of 5. And in fact, sexual 5s are falling in the top 5 subtypes for that. But overall, these folks, sexual 5s, much more likely to have sexual partners, intimate partners, and romantic partners than 5s at large. Usually you'll find sexual 5s have some kind of interaction, even if it's just casual. When we think of 5s generally are being more like hermit-like or solitary, sexual 5s tend to have these romantic entanglements. But what's interesting is, as the counter type, the behavior of the sexual 5 behind closed doors with their partner, casual or not, is very, very different than the other 2 subtypes of 5. But from the outside looking in, if you didn't know that, we look the same. We have the same squirreliness about answering questions about ourselves, the same privacy, the same avarice around keeping our information about ourselves to ourselves. But with our intimate partner, they tend to be kind of our confidant, where we share a lot, we share more, we're more emotional, a little more dramatic, a little more passionate, and we appear more 4-like to the intimate partner. So sometimes the intimate partner of a sexual 5 is like, aren't you a 4? You're always having these feelings and you're really interested in connection. But then the 5 is acting like a 5 to everyone else. And the last thing I'll say about this is that sometimes like the special interest, the kind of sexual partner interest, even if they're casual, will know way more about the sexual 5 than even like the sexual 5's best friend will know. Because there's something about the intersection of the sexual passion, the sexual dominance, need for passion and connection and intensity, combined with the 5's tendency to privacy and to be closed off, that makes like a really interesting combination. So that's a picture of the sexual 5. What about the self-pres 5, Lindsay?
So I'm married to a self-pres 5, so I experience self-pres 5 all the time in my home environment. What I think is really interesting is that what you might see with self-preservation 5s is that they have no problem really being single and can be single sort of longer term, right? And the interesting thing is like it's like they are okay with being single. It's not as if they feel like a longing or a desire or a need for a partner. Like there is some like comfort sort of in that solitaire or like being kind of that hermit sort of in your home. That being said, when a self-preservation 5 does let you into your world, like you are in their world, like you are their person. It was interesting. A lot of what you will see is a lot of self-preservation 5s. It's like they may end up being married, but if you ask them about their history, The answer you might get is like, well, this person really wasn't worth me investing my energy in. I'd rather hang out with my friends or read the areas of topic of interest. And that, if there's someone worthy of that energy for me, I will go into that and that'll be the thing. But then they go into it and that is the thing. That is kind of like very committed partners, very present partners, and all of that as well. They do come into therapy a lot with partners, especially because they sort of present as the lower sexual desire partner. Now, as we have mentioned, Sam and I, is that it isn't actually a desire issue. It's sort of that dyadic desire issue, right? It's sort of like things need to be just right. And so there is more of sort of like, there's more things to sort of work through. They have to have the energy or the desire to want to move in that, but they may choose more solo sex or self-pleasure sex experiences to sort of get those sexual needs met. I think the interesting thing is that what you can see with true with any self-preservation dominance, but especially with the fives, is like you may not be having a whole lot of sex at home, and all of a sudden you go on vacation and they're like, let's have sex every day. And you're like, whoa, where did that come from? You're at home, you're like, maybe every once a month or maybe every couple of months, and I'm happy and I'm fine. And all of a sudden you're on vacation and it's like they can have a sexual appetite where they're actually interested in it every day because there's more capacity, more energy, more ability to rest. It's about the relationship and those types of things. So I think that's a very interesting dynamic. And Sam and I are like speculating that, as fives are just as self-preservation people in general, as they get to be older, sort of they may have higher sex drives because all this context is sort of moved out of the way. What else would you add, Sam?
What's bringing to mind for me is to compare the focus group that we had for sexual fives to the self-preservation fives focus group. And again, we didn't end up having a social fives focus group because the social fives did not want to do it. But in the self-preservation five group, about 50% of the people, and it was all ages, but mostly like 30 and up, about 50% of the people were lifelong single and happy that way. And in fact, one of the quotes from one of the women in the group said, people like feel sorry for me and I don't understand why. I'm basically won the jackpot of life. Like I am having the best time, just doing everything my way, being living alone, having the house the way I want, doing all the activities I want. Like this is such a great life. In the sexual five group, everyone had at least a casual partner. Or if they didn't, they were kind of like talking to people or looking for one. So that's a really stark difference I noticed between self-preservation fives and sexual fives. Self-preservation fives and self-preservation nines, incidentally, are some of the folks that we see as lifelong single, who are totally happy with it. And those tend to be the only two types that I usually will see, who are just like living their best solitary life. So that's what springs to mind for me. And the last thing I'll say is that self-preservation fives are reporting the absolute lowest dyadic sexual desire of all 27 subtypes, just to emphasize that again. That doesn't mean they don't feel desire in their body. That doesn't mean they don't love you or want you. It just means that they have, the most contexts to move through to move into relational sex. Like Lindsay said, they're conserving their energy. So overall, when they think about how often do I want to be engaging in partnered sex, they're saying the lowest amount.
Well, I realize this time is going by very quickly, Sam, and we should probably get to some of the questions that we had that people wanted to know about fives. So, one of the questions we had is, how do I get out of my head? What does being present look like for a five?
That is the question. That's the question. That's a really good question. So I'm going to answer both parts. How do I get out of my head is you might not be able to. Even after years of work, I still tend to pop in and out of my head during sexual intimacy, and that is okay. Um, being Present, though, I think really does look like being present in the body and with the sensations. So, what I recommend is a couple things. One is to do like a meditative kind of practice. If you already do regular meditation, this will be much easier, wherein you ground your attention to the body sensations throughout the encounter. Every time you notice your thinking, you go and ground back to sensation, and you don't judge it. So you're not like, oh, I'm thinking again. You just, okay, I notice I'm back in my head, grounding back to the body. And breath practices are really helpful for that. Lindsay, you talk always about body scan meditations, I think are really helpful to build that awareness. That's always a great tip. And then something that I personally like to recommend, it might not work for everyone, depends on your partner, their type, their comfort level. Your partner can help if they're tuned in enough to notice when your attention goes to the head. They can bring you back to the body in some way. They can squeeze your arm, or if you like, light biting or something, they can just bring you to a body sensation and be like, hey, like come back to the body. I'm partnered with an 8, so he's really good about that. And that can help, or they can just say something sexy, or just say like, oh, I want to connect with you or whatever. And that can remind our 5s to get back in the body. So hopefully that answers that question.
Well, we had somebody type in a question that they wanted to ask, and we actually had a similar question. So I will ask the question that the person typed in, and they said, how does sexuality struggle play with all the subtypes of 5, like same-sex attraction? And so they're just asking some questions about how the different types, subtypes might struggle around sexuality and how it might look different.
For the subtypes of 5,
But subtypes of 5, yep.
and how they might struggle with, is it like sexual orientation, or can you ask it again? I think I missed the
Sure.
beginning.
What they typed is, how does sexuality struggle play with all the subtypes of a 5, like same-sex attraction?
Okay, I don't know if I 100% understand what they're saying, but I'll just try to see if I can answer it. So I think if we're talking about same-sex attraction, like how the different subtypes would struggle with feeling that, I would think we have self-preservation 5s tend to be the most stereotypical 5 in terms of their shyness, and then socials in terms of privacy. So if we were going to deal with some same sex attraction, I actually just had a self preservation 5 talking about this. It would be like they were fine with it personally within their own experience, but the idea of sharing it with anyone else was like really intimidating, because 5s, it's not that we expect to be judged exactly, but it's like if we share something private and vulnerable about ourselves, we feel like others are going to take it away from us. So I did just work with someone who was um, kind of telling me about some same-sex attraction that and relationships that they had had. It was a self-pres 5. No one else knew about it, and the idea that someone else would know was really intimidating, because it just felt so like tender and vulnerable to them. I think we would see the same with social, and in my experience with sexual 5s are more free flowing with that kind of thing. Not so much that we would be broadcasting our business to the world, which we do not do, but we would be a little less worried about that. So I don't know if that answers, because I'm not sure if I perfectly understood, but the person who asked, feel free to ask clarifying question if I did not answer it.
Well, let's move on to the next one then, which is, how many 5s are asexual?
Okay, so I did answer this in stories. I think that we don't have any evidence to suggest that more 5s are asexual than anyone else, than any other type, although we didn't do a study specifically on that. In focus groups, we haven't seen that. So I don't think so. I don't think more 5s are asexual than other types. What I do think is that from the outside looking in, 5s appear to be asexual because many, many types, almost all the other types, do not understand how we can live without relationships, how we can live without sharing ourselves, how we can live without connection. And it's just a factor of, the type structure, the ego structure is happiest solitary without input from others. So we can easily live without our needs, those needs being met, and other types look at us like, oh, you must be asexual because you don't seem to need it. I think within the five ego structure, like within the five type, we actually are not asexual. It's just that the more fixated a five is, the more we think we can live without other people, which isn't true.
Yeah, the only thing I would add about asexuality is basically any type can be asexual. And so it's not really type determined. I think like what Sam's saying is the reason people may believe that fives are, like you said, is because they are better at being self-contained and not sharing, basically, and are private. um, well, I was getting closer to the end, so I'm thinking I think we've got like two more questions I'm gonna ask, and then maybe just stop there and then kind of wrap up for today. But I think there's a quick one on the tendencies for fives to be hypersexual, and so I was just curious what you thought about that particular question, Sam.
Yeah, I thought that's a really interesting question. And I also answered this in stories that I don't see that with most fives. Overall, most fives would not be perceived that way. But the the way that fives can detach and compartmentalize makes, again, other people looking at them, it's like, oh, they're not getting attached to their sexual partner, especially our self-pres fives, right? They must be just hypersexual. They just have lots of sex and they don't care. Well, that's not really the case. It's that, yes, without having a committed relationship, our self-pres and social, especially self-pres, can be compartmentalized and not be getting like emotionally attached to these kinds of encounters. Then I also think sexual fives, that drive for the passion, intensity, and connection, mixed with our ability to dissociate from our body and our feelings, can result in a little bit of hypersexuality within the sexual subtype.
That's a really good point. I've heard some self-preservation fives say like there's a different bucket for casual sex and relational sex and connected sex. And one comment that I got once is like, well, if I have a casual sexual experience with someone and they're upset, that's their problem, not mine, because that was the agreement that we made. There was not to be feelings involved in that casual sexual experience, which I think can be very confusing, right? For other types where that like even that casual sexual experience still has some connection or still has some emotion involved. But you're right on there, Sam, with that one. And so the last question is how can a direct five talk to how a direct five can talk to a shy how I don't even know how that I'm even saying this right. How a direct five can talk to a shy about sex four and entice him. Did I get
Yeah,
that right?
yeah.
Yeah.
This question made me laugh. So I want to answer it. It's very specific, but I want to answer it because it speaks to like a larger thing with fives, which is that fives are very direct. If you're looking for the difference between like a sexual five and a four, we're not going to be doing this whole emotional game. We're just going to be quite direct and to the point about our feelings and what we want. So when this question came in about a four, it's like fours are not like that. Fours are wanting really deep emotional connection. They want to feel seen. They want to feel like their vulnerability is respected, their depth is respected. So fives and fours actually can be a great couple, a great pairing, because they both have a lot of an interior life and they see that and respect that in each other. So I guess when it comes to, enticing four, fives can come across too direct to people. We are going to miss a lot of the subtleties of some people of other types like nines who are coming on to us so subtly that we don't see it. So I would try to temper the directness a little bit and the aloofness a little bit. And sometimes we're perceived as cold or uncaring, and really go to your heart space. Four is a heart type, and feel with them, like see their feelings, like care about their feelings. Don't pretend. They'll know if you're pretending. and see them, and that's like a big turn on for fours. So I guess that would be my advice for that person.
I got some huge ahas from you today around the difference between a sexual 5 and a 4. Because I was just like, oh, okay. I thought someone maybe was a 4, and I actually think now they were probably a sexual 5, just based on some of the information that you gave. And that's really insightful, like what you shared too about how sexual 5s can show up kind of 4-ish in the intimate relationship. But the difference would be is they would have a very similar private, and 4s are private too, but it's just different. And I just thought I had a huge aha today, with you sharing that, Sam, just the difference between, which I think will make me more aware of when I have confusion around if someone's a 5 or a 4. There's a little aha moment there. So that's wonderful. Well, we are already at the end of Sexy First Friday. That went so quickly, as they always do. If you have, so this is episode 5 of our series of the Type and Sexuality series. So if you have missed the episodes for 9, 8, 7, and 6, you can go back into our YouTube, or we have a YouTube channel, as well as they will be here listed on our Instagram pages for you to watch later. Next month, we move into our heart types. So I think our heart types are going to be a little different than our head types and even the gut types that we have already seen and how they approach sexuality. And we have a social 4, correct, coming next month. We wanted to get some more social dominant instinct in there. Me being social dominant, I said, hey, we need some more social dominance to come in. And so we get to have a social 4, which I think will be really exciting for us to learn a little bit more from him. As well. And we also need more male energy, we decided. And I think that's it. Did I miss anything else that I should let our viewers know about, Sam?
I think that's it. If you missed our Enneagram Instincts and Sexuality workshop, which we did yesterday, we have that recording going up, and that'll be available to purchase too if you're interested in that.
Yep, just DM Sam or I. It's in the bio too, I think, for both of us if you want to order it. And thank you again. It's great to have everybody here, and we can't wait to talk about 4s next month. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.